This is Maestro Eduardo Francesco Maria Lucrezia, or David Walden, and I am here today with my lovely assistant, who's off to the side here, Master Finn, Baron Finn, and we are going to talk to you today about eggs from the Martino Manuscript. So now originally I was going to talk to you a little bit about the history, and then I was going to start cooking. But I think I'm going to get some things started, and then I will talk about the history of the manuscript and the eggs and all that as we go. Now I'm going to try to turn this. We had a good setup of a phone and a camera, and the camera on the laptop, but we can't do that now. So I'm hoping you can see that I've started everything. And Disa, can you see it okay?
That looks great. Yep, that looks fantastic.
Oh, great. Really hot. So the phone overheated. We're hoping the computer's not going to. It's not as hot. But I'm going to start some eggs, and then we'll talk about the history. So today we're going to cook, and I hope I'm coming up to the computer so you can hear me a little bit better. We're going to cook 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recipes, and one of them has 3 variations. So the first thing we're going to cook is a frittata with herbs. And this is from the manuscript, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. All this is eggs, milk, which is quite unusual, grated cheese, and I'm going to use Parmesan for that, some butter, and some herbs. And I'm going to cook it over here and start over here, so hopefully you can see. So all I've got is 3 eggs, and I'm mixing them up with a little bit of milk, just a touch of milk. It just softens the eggs. What the butter, it also has butter. It calls for butter and milk in this recipe, which is very unusual. What happens with the milk and the dairy protein is that it softens the eggs. It doesn't make them as hard. So I'm just whipping up the eggs. I hope you can see. I'm going to put a little bit of milk. I already did. Some grated Parmesan that I grated ahead of time. And some herbs. And I need the herbs for another recipe, so I'm not going to use all of them. And it doesn't say what kind of herbs to use. It just says herbs. In Martino, marjoram is ubiquitous. So I would have used marjoram, but I don't have any. So I use some thyme, some sage, some rosemary, and some parsley. And I'm just going to
Eduardo,
put it in what?
When you're talking, if you could make sure you're pointed towards the computer so that we can hear you well.
Yeah, that's why I keep coming back over here. So I'll try to do that.
Thank you, darling.
Put this in the fry pan with the butter over top of the coals. Now I've already heated all of the coals up ahead of time. It took about an hour to get them to this level. So it'll probably take you a little bit of time to do it. So this is just going to heat while we talk. The next ones that I'm going to do really quickly are poached eggs, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So here are the eggs that I'm using. Here's a store-bought egg, just a regular large store-bought egg. Here is a fresh egg from my in-laws. So let's compare those two if you can. That would be great. See, so they're pretty close. Maybe this isn't this is extra large. This is a large, and this one is one from their Banty chickens. So it's tiny. So the size of the egg would vary quite a bit. You can see how much variation there is here, and it always just calls for eggs. It doesn't say how many. I really like for the poached ones to use the fresh ones. And this poached egg recipe, there's 3. There's one in water, like we normally poach eggs, one in wine, and it doesn't say red or white. I'm using red today. I hope you can see that down here, red. And then the most amazing one is poached eggs in milk. So we've done this a couple of times. The lactic acid in the milk congeals the egg white in a way that these eggs poached in milk are amazing. And that's all they are. So I'm going to break them over here. It's very hot right now. And put them in the water. I'm going to do 2 in each. And they're going to take a while to poach. So that's why I wanted to get things started. I'm going to do 2 more in each of the other ones. In the wine, we don't really like it in the wine. It has a little acidic flavor to it. It's not great. I think I'd try white wine next time, but I wanted to show you the color. It's so beautiful. And then the last one, I'm gonna do 3. I'm gonna do 3 eggs in this one because this milk one is so delicious. Pardon? Oh, that's hot. So normally I might not cook this high a heat, but I should have started the coals a little earlier, I think. And then we would have gotten a little more gentle heat. You can see on the far side that the frittata's starting to harden up. I like to, it doesn't say this in the original recipe, but I really do like to put a lid on top of it so that all of the egg is cooked through. It helps a lot. You can also see how the ones in the water are starting to poach. The ones
how hot should the milk be, Eduardo?
The milk, you have to get it at a gentle simmer. You don't want it too, you can see at the edge, I hope. Here, let me take the computer down a little bit. You can see it's just slightly bubbling. You don't want it boiling. You don't want it, no, there. You don't want it boiling. You don't want it too hot, just gentle simmer. Now I can't get you back to the...
Would duck or goose eggs be used as well?
So there's no indication that there were any differences in the eggs. They just called them eggs. They didn't say use duck eggs, use goose eggs, use chicken eggs. They just said eggs. So I think that realistically it was whatever was on hand, right? So you had a flock of poultry. You probably had a egg flock versus a meat flock, and you just knew what size the eggs were and you used them. I've used duck, I've used goose, I've used, I think even for the egg spitting, which we'll do in a little bit, we've used all sorts of types of eggs. And they're basically the same once you cook them. It's just a matter of size. So really you want to be careful around the size. Those eggs are really doing well. And
what kind of coals are you using? Wood
so
or charcoal?
Good question. And I will answer in 2 seconds after I look to see what the next recipe is. Okay, the spit. So the next 2 recipes, we're going to wait a bit so I can answer that. So the easiest accessible, it's lump charcoal, and we use the Cowboy brand, is very, very easy to get. However, we also use mesquite lump charcoal from Cash and Carry, and it's really pretty inexpensive. It's about $13 for a 20-pound or a 30-pound bag, and that's what we tend to use. The lump, you can just use regular old charcoal too if you want, and we've seen sort of briquette style lump charcoal in use. So you want a hardwood lump charcoal because you want the coals to be like cinders. So let me lift up the, here's Brian also showing you the bag. Although we've got such, there you go. This one's called Royal Oak Hardwood Lump Charcoal. Lots of it is mesquite. Mesquite's really cheap, so that we tend to do that. Let's lift up the top of this frittata. Oh, you can see it's puffing up. So, I'll just take this one here. Yeah. See, so it's getting to be like a frittata or a omelet. The middle isn't cooked quite, so I'm gonna just keep it covered and put it over. It's very hot. I've got to find my gloves. There it is. And put it over here. I just need it. Okay. We're just going to put it to the side so it can gently cook a little bit more and cook through. I'm very allergic to raw egg whites, so I really need to make sure it's cooked all the way through. That's good. And then I'm going to cover it again to keep it going. And it's really important that all your places are level, because you just saw, I don't know if you could see it, but it spooged out the edge. There we go. So before we start the next, let's go ahead and start the eggs on a gridiron. So besides eggs on a spit, which really started us in this whole egg cookery thing, we also have eggs on a gridiron. So this is a gridiron here. It's an iron that has slots in it. And so you have to cook an egg on it. This is a cook's trick, right? What happens if you cook an egg on that? All of the egg is gonna flow through those grates and be a total mess. But Martino has a trick. So the title of the recipe is Eggs on a Gridiron. But then what he does is he takes a pancake or a frittata, they call it a pancake, and puts that down first. And I made one ahead of time. So you put your pancake down, and don't burn yourself. I'm not used to cooking over fire now. By this time, usually I've cooked a lot. There we go. So you can see that you put the pancake down as a base. Then you take eggs, and this is the part that's really, you must have a totally level surface, or the egg will fall off. So it's not level. Let's try this. No, now it's not going to be level there. So get your grate really level before you put your egg on. You can see it's picky. This is a really big trick to do. I got to put the eggs down. No, I'm fine. I just need to get this level. It wasn't level in it. It fell off. That's level. Okay, I hope that you see. I think it's level. The best way to tell if it's level is to take an egg and crack it. Ah! Not level. Okay, spatula. Let's try to see. So I think that's level. I just think that what we're seeing is a little bit of slipperiness. Okay, I'm gonna let it harden a bit up here before I let this go.
Does Martino mention the pancake, or is it from trial and error?
No, Martino actually mentions it. Okay, so we're almost level. Okay, perfect. You're supposed to put 4 of those on that little pancake. We're not going to do that today. We're just doing 1 because that's just too much. Then you sprinkle this with cinnamon and sugar. And then I'm going to cover it with the cloche because I wanted the egg white to cook through again. And look at that. That's beautiful. Beautiful frittata. Very hot. Thank you, babe. That looks delicious. And it's got cheese and all of that in it. We're gonna test our poached eggs too. So we've got the poached eggs going. And normally too, when we do this in person, we don't cook everything at once, but I've only got a certain amount of time. So look at that poached egg. Can you see that? Perfectly poached in the water. I've got a little here for the eggs. Oh, see, he said he wasn't going to be any help at all because he didn't know this, but he's fabulous and not bad to look at. So there's the poached eggs. I'm going to see if the poached eggs and wine are done.
I can't tell whether you can see that or not.
Can you see that okay, Disa?
I think we can mostly see it. We can't see perfect detail, but we can see
Okay,
that.
those poached eggs are great. These ones in the red wine look like brains. Can you? And then the milk poached ones, seriously delicious, amazing. We love the poached eggs and milk.
Somebody just suggested a wall of cinnamon sticks around the edge of the pancake might help with the egg.
Yeah, it's just a trick. Now look at those ones in the milk. I don't know if you can see, but how the lactic acid has really congealed. They're just these little perfectly poached packages. That's like such an alliteration. Perfectly poached packages of poultry something. Anyhow, so the lactic acid really, really changes the shape. Play with this a lot. Really, if you start poaching your eggs in milk, you won't go back to water. And of course, the wine it's not that great. And then you can see underneath the pancake how the egg is starting to solidify. We're going to leave it a little bit longer because I really need the egg to be cooked all the way through. Maybe you can go get a plate and plate the frittata.
Catherine asked, what kind of red wine are you using?
So I'm using this, I don't know if you can see all the way over here or not. I'm using this wonderful red wine from a winery close by to us. It's just a table wine, but it's a bag wine, and I put it in our barrel. So we got one of the barrels, so it's just a table wine, a red table wine. Easy peasy, not anything fancy, about 12% alcohol, nice to make. So I wanted to talk a little bit about pipkins. I don't really know who's on and what your experience level is. This is a pipkin from the 1500s, right around the turn of the century, 1490s to about 1500. You can see that it has 3 legs to keep it up slightly from the fire. This way you can put a little bit of coals underneath and keep some heat underneath it. I never cook with this, obviously, because it's an actual pipkin from the 1500s. It's glazed slightly inside, but not very much. They were disposable pots, not like one use, but probably like, half a year's worth. And then they were probably disposed of. If you're just starting out, you can go to, once you can go again, you can go to Pier 1 and just get some flat ones. You need to make a little base to keep them up. So that's what we did here. This one is just a cheap $2 bean pot sort of thing. It doesn't have legs, so we've made a little stand for it, and we just clip it up and make a little stand to keep it up. Or you can get them made by potters. This one was made by Morgana of the woods. This is my very first pipkin, and the leg's broken off. I still use it. I pushed it up against the side and still use it. There's lots of potters that make pipkins. You can get one for about between $25 and $50, depending on it. Here's another one that's got stubby little legs. This was also Morgana. My favorite potter for pipkins is Morgana or Gwen the Potter, but lots and lots of different people you can find pots for. Morgana made the cloche too. Oh, that looks nice now too. So we're finished with that.
Eduardo, what type of milk were you poaching in?
I poached it in whole milk.
And is the wine like a sweet or a dry wine?
It's a dry red wine. And then there's eggs on a gridiron. Now I'm gonna cut this and serve it. It's usually cut in 4 because usually you do 4 eggs. So I'll cut it. Oh, I think Brian's using his phone now. Here and here. And normally there would be 3 more eggs. And then that's a serving.
Do you want me to spotlight that video?
Yeah, or I can just bring it up here. There you go. So there's a little serving of an egg poached on a gridiron. It's really a trick. It's really a conceit for cooks, just like the eggs on a spit are that we're going to do in a minute. But let's talk a little bit now about the history. So I'll come up to me. And you
Stop the video.
okay? And I just saw Deesa's face, but it's not really her face; it's her picture. And she's got this big windswept hair and happiness on her. So let me talk.
I was in Birka during that picture, so yeah, I was pretty happy.
And let me see what time it is. Okay, we've got about half an hour. I'm going to do 2 more egg recipes in a minute. I'm going to do the famous because we all started doing this at 30 year. It was craziness. We found multiple recipes from all sorts of different cookbooks, but mostly from the Martino corpus. And we had all of the cooking geeks from all over the known world here at 30 year. And we sat around the fire at night and we spit eggs. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that. We're gonna do it, and then I'm gonna also do eggs in the cinders as the final one. And this is really hot. So let's go someplace else. Well, we talk about the history because the computer's getting pretty hot. Where do you want to go? Okay, we're just gonna, maybe we'll sit on the stairs or something. Oh, okay, and then I'll need my books, so. Oh, here we go, we'll put it on the other one. Are you still okay? Can you still see us okay?
Yep, you're still good.
Oh, good, okay. Oh, look, and there's a propane tank here I can sit on and talk to you. And well, my lovely assistant goes and gets me my books so that I can show you some books and talk a little bit about the history. So at 30th year, we did the egg spitting. Before that, I was very involved in Martino. I don't know why, it's just from my time period. I love the text. I could read Italian a little bit at that time. I read it much better now. And I learned to read Renaissance Tuscan, so I could translate. It's fairly close to modern Italian, so I could translate, and I'm very involved in Martino. You ask anyone on the known world's cooks list, or even actually at modern cooks and modern historians. Martino's my geek. And his manuscript is about from 1460. So in the early 1900s, we discovered that Martino and Platina were fairly similar. They thought, oh, one has derived from the other, and then it was discovered that actually there's a few references in Platina, De Honesta Voluptate, which is the very, very first printed cookbook in the world. Platina actually took the last 5 chapters of his book directly from Martino. He stole them directly from Martino. And there are lots and lots of other books that derive from Martino and Platina because of that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the origins. So the first book that we have of Martino is from the Library of Congress. And it's around 1465-ish, 1463. We're not exactly sure. It's a handwritten manuscript. I am fairly certain this is the first book of the Martino series. There's lots of other manuscripts. Are you going to put that underneath me? Thanks. Oh, the propane tank was a little bit uncomfortable. There's lots and lots of other manuscripts, but I am almost certain through the research that I've done in a new article that I will publish soon that the Library of Congress is the original. Here's what it looks like in manuscript format. This is a microfiche of it. I hope you could see it. And that's the beginning page. And then I'm just going to show you really quickly, and I'm going to do this for every book, but this is the most important one. And here is the beautiful calligraphy of the manuscript. And it's all handwritten. And I've seen this in person and touched it. In the Library of Congress, they allowed me to review it. And many of the articles that I've written for academic journals are attached to it at the Library of Congress. The next important manuscript to talk about, and we're going to talk about 7, is from the Vatican Library. And it's definitely a copy of the Library of Congress's manuscript. There are some really interesting scribal jumps that you can say, oh, this scribe went from here to there in the Library of Congress one. The nice thing about the Vatican Library one too is that it also has an index. So let me show you the index that it comes with it. So not all the recipes in the index are actually in the book, but here's an index. So that's why the Vatican one is so important, because it's the first one with an index. You can see similar handwriting, not the same. It's a similar style, but a very different scribe. It also has some interesting things like little doodles. Here's a doodle of a person's hand, the scribe's hand, and there's a couple of places where he uses his hand and he points to recipes. So he says, this is an important recipe. Oh, my wonderful husband just brought me something to drink. So those are the 2 first really important manuscripts. Then Platina, and those are not available except in microfilm. You can get a copy of the Library of Congress one on a wonderful CD, DVD by Octavo Press, OCTAVO. And it's a translation and a side by side. It's a really great. It's the best Martino translation there is out there, and that's the one that you should use if you can still get a hold of it. You can also zoom in on the text, so it's really handy to look and try to see if she's really translated the word right. So our internet is on Stassini. Disa?
I can see you, but you're a little bit unstable.
Okay, yeah, it just told me that. So, so those are the first 2. Then comes along Platina. And as I said, Platina wrote this book. This is the best edition. It's by Mary Ella, E-L-L-A, Mary Ella Milham. very easy to get a hold of, but very expensive. On right, pleasure and good health. That means de honesta voluptate. And it consists of 10 chapters, or what he calls books, like from a classical perspective. The first 5 are agricultural in nature, and they talk about the different plants and how to use them and all of that. The last 5 chapters or books are taken from Martino. The interesting thing about Plotina is that it's in Latin. And Latin is not a very friendly cooking language. Milham has translated a few things, I believe, incorrectly, because she's not a cook and the language itself is really pretty clumsy. It's worth having. You can see I've really marked it up, and I've done lots of notes on it, taken lots of notes and highlighted on it. I love this book, even with the few flaws that I see. And I wrote an article for Petits Propos Culinaires, this little journal, PPC 95, on the hidden recipes of Plotina. The first 5 books, as I said, were agricultural in nature, but he sort of hides and talks briefly about how to cook things amongst them. So in this article, you'll have 65 new recipes that people haven't really explored in the past. And many, many, many of them are vegetable recipes. It actually might be 85 and 65 of them are vegetable. Anyhow, this is something to pick up if you want to know more about Plotina. I give a little bit of a history and I talk about that. So when we move on past the other translation of Martino, let's go back a little bit, is also available now too, and it's The Right Art of Cooking. This is the Ballerina, Dr. Ballerina did the, don't you love that his name's Ballerina, did the introduction, and it's fabulous. The translation was done by Jeremy Parson, and he was a master's student somewhere in California, I don't know where, and I won't say more than get Jillian Riley's translation from Octavio. There's some really some problems with the translation, and there's some problems with things being left out of it, but it is really readily available and it's easy to get. So if you can't get anything else, that's a good book to get. After Plotina, there's also Buhler 15. So it's the Neapolitan cookbook. My dust jacket is off, so you can't really see it. But this is by Scully. I'll put it up a little bit so you can see it. The Neapolitan Recipe Collection. It's from a manuscript in the Medical Library in New York, and it is Neapolitan in origin. Scully argues that this book was the originator of the Martino manuscripts, but he doesn't really give very much evidence. There's definitely a precursor to Martino. I don't believe that it's the Neapolitan manuscript, but it also follows Martino fairly closely, and more research needs to be done on how they're associated. They're, again, almost identical. And from a standpoint of just the egg recipes, there are 13 recipes in the original Martino manuscript. There are 14 recipes. There are 13 in the Vatican. And then, you know, it varies, but they follow each other fairly similar through all of these. Now, after I've dropped my notes, hold on. After Neapolitan or Buhler 15, you also see Roselli. And so now we're getting into the 1500s, and he's about 1518-ish. And it's a direct copy of the Buhler. It's very, very close. And you can't get a copy of Roselli except in Cucina Italiano, and it's in Italian, but it is very, very similar to Latina, to Martino, to Buller 19. They're all related. They all follow each other very closely. And then finally, and I didn't bring it with me, but I'll just tell you about it. The final one, manuscript, is from 1598. So almost 150 years after Martino wrote it. And it appears in England in 1598 in English. So it's called the Epilario because Rosselli's copy was subtitled Epilario, which means a banquet or a feast or a gathering. It's a hard word to translate from Renaissance Tuscan, but it sort of means a gathering that has food. Sometimes they're called operas too, which are also banquets with food. And so we have an English translation, fairly bad English translation at times, of the Martino manuscript. For instance, so the last recipe that we'll do, or the second to last, is the eggs on a spit, and we'll do that momentarily because I think we have some time. He says to take a spit and tie your eggs onto it, not to thrust the spit through. All the other recipe books say to thrust the spit through the egg and cook it that way. He tells you to tie it on. So there's some problems with that, but it's a fun manuscript to do. And the interesting part is that in PPC 102, I did an article that started out sort of as a joke article for PPC for the editor and turned into a very sort of scholarly article comparing all of the egg spitting recipes in each of those manuscripts that I just described. So you can look at the difference in language, you can look at the difference in placement in the manuscript, and then our friend, my friend and colleague from Cooks did a wonderful, Dawn did a wonderful woodcut version of how to spit an egg. So here's some of her woodcuts. This is still available. It is not available free like the Oxford papers because they're still selling PPC. So there's some woodcuts of that. So we'll go and spit those eggs in a little bit. Besides those 7 manuscripts that we talked about, there's one other Martino manuscript that we know of, and it's in a private collection. We only seen the front cover of it when it went up for auction at Christie's in the 70s, I think. And it's disappeared into private hands and we don't know where it is. But it looked like it was a presentation copy of Martino. Martino was a cook to a very high official in the papal court. So his manuscript is probably illuminated and put on fine vellum and was presented to the papal court or to one of the cardinals, and that's where that manuscript probably came from, so that makes 8. We also have a manuscript that is supposed to be related, and I have not been able to get a copy of it yet, but Gillian Riley, who I know through Oxford, through the symposium, has said that she's looked at it and she believes that it's pretty similar, but I need to take a closer look, is in the British Library. So that makes 9. And then there's a 10th one in Sheffield that is not photographed and we can't get our hands on it. I've got to go and look at it to see how closely related it is. So this is a large group of manuscripts that are all interrelated. And you can especially tell that they're interrelated through the egg recipes because they are almost all there. Some of them have a few more recipes, some of them have a few less recipes, but they're all related. They all have the frittatas, they all have the poached eggs. There's a recipe for scrambled eggs. There's a recipe on how to fry an egg. So just basic egg recipes that we still cook today. We might not cook them in wine, we might not cook them in milk, but we still poach eggs today. So it's a really fascinating group of recipes. So before I go back to spit the eggs, and then I'll be spitting in cinders. If the cinders have calmed down a little bit, we'll do the cindered eggs. Are there any questions? I see there's a whole bunch in the chat. Maybe I can just open the chat. Or, Disa, have you been collecting questions?
We have some comments on the books. Barbara said, I met Mary Ellen Milhelm at Serve It Forth conference in Colorado Springs. She said that she translated Platina because it was easier to translate cookery than other things. She also said she was surprised that people would actually use her book as a cookbook.
Yeah, it's really interesting. She's done a good job on the translation. What her translation is the compilation. So what she's tried to do is she's taken all of the Latin versions of Platina, and there are hundreds of different versions, and sort of tried to make them into the absolute or the best Platina she can get to. The unfortunate part is that sometimes she translates the words, a word for herbs as herbs, and sometimes she translates it as vegetables, and sometimes she translates it as greens, so without looking at the Martino manuscript and without looking at the other English translation that we have, it's a little clumsy. But yeah, it's a very scholarly Latin translation and comparative analysis of the Latin. She's done a great job on that. From a cooking standpoint, I wish she partnered up with a cook at some point so that they could say, well, do you think this is herbs? Or do you think this is greens? Or do you think maybe they're talking about the vegetable that's referred to in the title? So it's interesting. So, and I've just been working on a recipe from the first 5 books of that called from the beet section, beets, and I've always thought about it as beets and garlic. Well, when I go back and look now at the Latin, because it says beets cooked under the coals are wonderful if they're served with garlic. Well, when I go back and look at the original Latin, I don't actually think that's what they're saying. I think what is being said is that when you cook garlic in the ashes like beets, it's delicious. If you look at the way that the Latin is put together, that's what I think she's saying. I don't think that Platina is saying, which is unfortunate because it's a delicious recipe, you chop up beets and chop up garlic and saute them and they're delicious. He's saying garlic loses its sharpness when you cook it under the coals like you do beets. So there's just some things that if she had more of a cooking background, it would have been great. But go buy this book if you can afford it. It has to be in your library if you're interested in Italian cooking of this century. Other questions or?
Matthew asked if there are any egg recipes that are not used today.
Eggs on a spit, except that we use them. So all of the recipes get used because we use them. So the frittata is used. I would say the only ones that aren't used are the eggs on a gridiron because they're also sweet and they've got the cinnamon with it. And we just don't do that with eggs anymore, except in custards. The eggs on a spit. I think that when we first found this recipe, we thought we'd never heard of like taking a hot spit or a hot rod and shoving it through an egg to cook it. So that one isn't used very much anymore. There's stuffed eggs, like I wouldn't say deviled eggs like we know them, but they're stuffed with like a deviled egg with herbs and spices and deliciousness. So that's pretty much used today. I think all of them except those 2 are used today.
Barbara asked, Platina's use of the Latin word bleta, B-L-E-T-A, does it mean beets?
Sorry.
Platina's use of the Latin word bleta, B-L-E-T-A, does it mean beets?
You know, I have to go back and look at the Latin. I'm not a Latin person. If you'd asked me the Renaissance Tuscan, I would probably know, but where are you finding that? In which section of Latina? That's probably a good question to take offline, and I'm happy to talk to you guys at any time about it. But I can look it up in Platina and see. I don't think he uses bletta. I think he uses, I'm trying to find it quickly for you. Quince, pork, eggs, butter. I think it's in the third book. Well, it's probably really boring for me to look up recipes. Why don't we take that offline and we'll talk about that more. Oh, here it is. On walnuts, saffron, coriander, pepper. Yeah, I can't find it quickly. So let's talk about that offline and I'll find you an answer for that. The stuffed eggs are delicious. The interesting part that we don't do normally, so I've caught up and I can see the chat from where Matthew talks about the stuffed eggs. So if there's questions above that, Disa, you can ask them, but I can catch up on these now. The interesting thing about the stuffed eggs is you do it just like a regular stuffed egg. You hard boil them, you take the yolks out, you mix them with herbs and things, you like some cheese and all sorts of goodness. And then you actually put them back in a fry pan and fry them. So it's a little different than than what we think of as deviled eggs today, but they're very delicious. And they've got herbs and they're really delicious. So try that one. You can find the recipe very easily online. On Facebook, it's easy to find me. I'll just type in my email address here, but it's better to do Facebook probably. My email address is thevastropast.com. There you go. There's my email. Oh, I sent that privately to Barbara. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to send it to everybody. Here you go. Any other questions, or do you want to go back and spit some eggs and cook some things in the cinders? Two new messages. You want to see spitting. You've done lots of spitting. The people that are calling to spit have done this before. Okay, we'll go back and we'll spit some eggs. So let me make sure I don't trip over anything. Bring the computer back now that it's cooled down. I hope my phone cooled down enough. I had to put it in the fridge. Okay, so this egg spitting, and now we'll do the cinders, cooking them in the cinders first, because I've got some nice cinders over here. So what basically you do with this, it's just basically hard boiling the eggs, but you do it in a dry heat. So we're gonna take some eggs, not these little itty bitty Banty eggs, they're too small, but just regular sized eggs. And we're gonna cook them in the cinders. Now the interesting thing is that they tell you can do it two ways. Oh, so I've just laid those in the cinders. Can you see that?
No, it's out of frame.
Okay, hold on.
Lisa, I'm gonna jump back in with my camera.
Yeah, you can see it. Oh, it's on the other side. Hold on, we're trying to get the shot. Well, while we're doing that, I'm gonna heat up my spit. So You can use a spit that's about this thickness if you've got a really big egg. I like to use this spit. It's thinner and it's easier to get through the egg. You have to heat it up first. Plotinus says that this is a foolish sport. A foolish sport and only for cooks. It's a conceit, and it probably is. I don't know if I have enough holes to do spitting. But we'll try.
So I've spotlighted the video of the coals.
Great. Okay, we're gonna heat up these spits and get them really hot, because we're gonna thrust it through the egg and then we're gonna cook them. The interesting thing about this recipe is you gotta make sure you do it slowly or your eggs will explode. And that's a lot of fun. Not. So it doesn't really say how long how long you should heat the spit up, but I like to get it pretty hot, because once you get the spit really hot, what happens is it sears the end. And then it closes the egg so that it doesn't gush all over too much. So you can see I'm getting the spits really, really hot. And then while this is happening, I'm also got these eggs over here in the cinders, and they're just cooking. Now there's two different recipes. It says you can just cook them in the cinders until they're hard boiled, or you can lop off the top and then put herbs in them. I'm gonna lop off the top of one in a little bit and put some herbs, and then I'm just gonna, what? Did you see that? No, on this side, it exploded. There we go. I haven't gotten the eggs in cinders to work very well because they normally explode. Okay, I'm gonna try one of the spits. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here and show you. I'm just gonna, I need the other glove, hold on. Use gloves before you do this, because that spit is really hot and it's sharp, and you don't want to hurt yourself. And trust me, we have. Okay, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? Okay, so I'm just wiggling it slightly to get it going, and then I'm gonna jab it through. There we go. And then I'm just gonna cook it like a marshmallow over the coals.
What kind of glove do you recommend?
These are welder's gloves.
A leather glove, something that you're not gonna hurt yourself. So this spit is a little bit, flat so that it won't roll too much, and you just continue to cook it over the spit. I like this one, but it's not acting very well today. So I'm gonna leave this here, up here, and I'm gonna use the other one. This one is a little bit thicker, but it's square. Whoa! Did you guys see that? The cindered egg exploded. Okay, so this one again, there. And it really is probably a cook's game because of the explosions, because of the funness. I don't know whether or not they actually ate them this way. Okay, so there. See, you can see this one is turning perfectly, just like a spit of meat. We're turning perfectly on this one, and the ends are really nicely.
You're gonna have to switch back and forth. It's too hot.
Okay, so you're gonna have to switch back to the other one, Disa. Okay, and then we're gonna.
We are switched back.
Okay, then we're gonna push it down. Yeah, it's getting too hot for his phone, and maybe a little bit further back. Can you see okay, or do you need it back a little
That
further?
looks good. Yeah,
Okay.
that looks good.
So all we do is we just keep spitting. We just keep turning and turning until the egg starts to vibrate. That's what some people say. My eggs have never vibrated until the egg is cooked all the way through. And so the next question you're going to ask is, how do you know when it's cooked all the way through? Well, you don't. So you just have to keep playing with it, and it depends on how hot the coals are, how big the egg is, all sorts of different things. So yeah, who knows? I'm going to put this other egg on here, and I'm going to do 2 eggs, which I've never done before, double egger. And then see how it's nice, because this is such a square spit. See how nicely they turn? And then we just keep turning. You want to come over and turn, and I'll do the cindered eggs, or do you want to show them the cindered egg that exploded? And then this is just, you know, in person it's so much more fun because we have lots to talk about and all of that sort of stuff. So that cindered egg exploded. But it's still good to eat, and the texture is really different than a boiled egg. So just take it off, let it cool a bit, and then try them. And they're sort of, the texture is a little bit more meat-like.
Do you think it's because they get heated up so quickly in the cinders
I think
that
it's
they explode?
high heat mostly. Even if you cook them very slowly in the cinders, they're still different. It's because the dry heat versus the wet heat, I think.
I wonder if they wouldn't pop a little hole in them.
Yeah, and obviously, I think that's a good observation that Brian made, that if you poke a little hole in them, they won't explode as much. However, there's a hole in the spitted eggs, and the spitted eggs explode sometimes too. I think it just depends on the amount of liquid and air pressure and all sorts of things in that. Oh, thank you. What a good idea. Now see that one that I transferred isn't spinning nearly as well. It's also breaking. But the other one, well, until I said it, was spinning really nicely. And then that's it. Eggs on a spit, eggs in the cinders. Oh, gushing eggs. Lots of fun. Yeah. Any questions or comments? There are like 350 recipes in Martino, and we've only just talked about a few of them. So lots more. I would love to do a class on vegetables, different vegetable recipes in Platina. That's sort of my next area of study. What are people interested in knowing about?
I have to say myself that I think that was really cool. I've never considered cooking an egg on a spit. I mean, that's that's fascinating. Let's see. Tiffany says, when I cooked eggs in cinders, they wept quite a lot of moisture. The explosions may also be more closely related to egg age.
Yeah, those ones are pretty fresh.
And then Rose said food preservation would be an interesting class.
Yeah, Donna can do that. Juana Isabella can do food preservation, not my area of study, but yeah, it's an interesting area of study. Martino doesn't do a lot with preservation. There's in China, there's a couple of recipes for pickles. There's a couple of recipes for preserving lard, and that's about it. That looks...
Donna said older eggs are better for hard boiling, so perhaps better in cinders too.
That might be a good idea. That might be a good idea. So this one was a failure. All of it gushed out. And that's it. Anything else that anybody wants to know? What time is it? Did we do an hour? Oh, we did almost exactly an hour. Which is what you told me I had.
I'm not seeing a lot more questions. People are saying they'd love to see more classes or veggie class. I'd love to see a veggie class too. Susan says, thank you. David, Matthew, and Disa.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, SCA camping food is another one that they mentioned.
So there's a really excellent book on SCA camping food by the Feudal Gourmet. So you should look at that. That's by the Madrona Culinary Guild. They have a great one on SCA camping food. So try that one. Oh, there's Morgana. Morgana's on there, Jean Wood. So she's the one I told you I liked her pipkins so much, and we cooked on with two of her pipkins today. Morgana, I still have my very first pipkin that you made for Anne Marie, and Anne Marie gave it to me, and it's got one leg missing. Yeah, we have the leg. I've tried to glue it on several times. I just sort of usually prop it up, and I still use it. It's great. I can still use my pipkin with the broken gimpy leg. So buy your pots from Morgana. Not your pot, your pots.
So somebody asked where the video will be available. I can answer that one. So I'll be posting it to YouTube in the next couple of days, and then I'll post it to the Facebook event page, and I'll also post it to my artist page, which is Early Sweden. And then I'm sure David will be, or Eduardo will be sharing it as well.
Sure, I'll share it if I'm able to do that. Oh, they've suspended sales. Okay, sorry. So Madrona, the Madrona Cooks Guild has suspended sales of the pamphlets during the pandemic. So you can't get that. Well, and you can't do camping food either, so because we can't camp. So I'm happy to have conversations offline with anybody. Oh, Brian's eating the poached egg in milk. It looks delicious. The ones in wine don't look so delicious. They sort of look like odd.
Beets. They kind of look like beets.
They do look like beets, don't they? Yeah, and I don't like the taste of them either. I'm going to try it with white wine next. Maybe white wine will be good. Yeah, egg supper for the gents or the dog, or we'll feed it to the girl. I don't think she'd eat it though. So, okay, thank you all so much. Let's talk more on all sorts of cook skills and known world cooks and all of that. So we'll see you soon.